Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone again to church, Sunday school this morning. I guess one of the special Sundays on the calendar, Palm Sunday, the day before, or the weekend before Easter Sunday. Hopefully everyone's ready to hear some good things from the Lord today. Sister Phyllis, would you mind opening our class with prayer for us before we begin, please? And today we're actually beginning a new quarter of study, but not a new subject matter. We've been looking for the last couple of quarters at miracles of Jesus, and the first two quarters we looked at dealt more with healing miracles, and now we're going to still looking at miracles of Jesus. We're going to look at something a little different. Our main text for today is going to be from Mark chapter 4, verse 35 to 41, if you want to turn there. We're going to be looking at the calming of the storm. So our focus is going to change a little bit from the miracles of healing to miracles that reveal the power of Christ over nature and miracles of raising the dead. When I read that when I was kind of reviewing over it this morning, I said miracles of power over nature and miracles of raising of the dead. We're fixing to have the greatest miracle of raising of the dead next Sunday that there's been. So I guess we're at a good time to start this quarter of study. The miracle we're going to look at today was performed to show his power over all creation in an effort to encourage his disciples and all that were with them to believe on him, Christ, as the impotent God in incarnate flesh. He is God. He is man. I can't explain it all. I wouldn't even try to, but it's true. He is both. He was God and man all at the same time. And in this lesson today, we're going to get to see his power over nature in that sense. So it's important to note the setting in which this miracle takes place. We kind of covered that on almost every single one of them. We looked a lot at the settings. And also we need to see and realize that this is recorded in 3 out of the 4 Gospels. We've studied a few miracles in the past quarter. Some of them are only in 1 Gospel, some are in 2 or 3. But so this miracle's 3 times to be seen. So even though the preceding events in each of these 3 Gospel accounts aren't exactly the same, the subsequent event is. So this signifies the impact that these stories, this story of the calming of the storm and right after this when they do get to the other side of the lake, it shows the impact that they had on the disciples. So we've got to come to realize that Jesus can do whatever's necessary to encourage his church to believe today. You know, man, if you turn on the news or look too much at social media, the devil is doing all he can to discourage not just mankind in general, but the church particularly. To me, a lot of things happen. I look at them and it seems like it's kind of singling out Christianity and some of the attacks that are going on to discourage us, but we needn't be discouraged. Christ is here to encourage us all the time, no matter the situation. So if you turn to Mark, we're going to read his account of the miracle of the calming of the storm. It's Mark chapter 4, verse 35. It says this, "And the same day when the even was come, he saith unto them, Let us pass over unto the other side. And when they had sent away the multitude, they took him even as he was in the ship, and there were also with him other little ships. And there arose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat into the ship so that it was now full. And he was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow, and they awake him and say unto him, Master, carest thou not that we perish? And he arose and rebuked the wind and said unto the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said unto them, Why are ye so fearful? How is it that ye have no faith? And they feared exceedingly, and said one to another, What manner of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? In my mind, as we begin to look at miracles over nature, that storm is a big thing to be a miracle over. I mean, I'm not an avid sailor or nothing like that, but I've been out fishing plenty of times where I'm coming across the bay, and all of a sudden, I can't even see where I'm at anymore, and I don't even know where I'm going. I can relate to being in that kind of weather, waves coming over the side of the boat and stuff, and I'm thinking, what in the world why was I coming out here like that for? But we can definitely see a few things about here, and the first thing we want to look at is the raging storm itself. Our text clearly tells us that the Lord and his disciples got in the boat after he sent the multitude away. This was probably done in an effort for them to get away from the crowd for a moment. It's got to be taxing having the crowd always talking to you, always wanting to see you, always wanting to see miracles, always asking all the time. They need some time to rest, not just the disciples, but Jesus himself. He needs some time to rest and rejuvenate a little bit. That's pretty evident by the fact that Jesus was in the hinder part of the ship. He was asleep on a pillow. They got in the boat. I wasn't there, but I see them getting in the boat, and it's like he heads straight in there. He needs to get some rest, and they should be doing the same. But in the middle of all that, a violent storm arose to the degree that the waves were beating onto the ship until it was filling up with water. It was about to sink. I read in there too, there's probably something there we may have time to address in this lesson, but it also says in verse 36, there were also with him other little ships. I sometimes wonder what them little ships were thinking. If the big ship is having trouble with water coming in it, what's the little ship saying? Matthew's account says it like this. There arose a great tempest in the sea, insomuch that the ship was covered with waves. Luke's account says they were filled with water and were in jeopardy. So obviously the danger was great because several of the disciples were fishermen. That was their trade. They were familiar with storms, yet they were terrified. They were in fear of their lives because of this storm. These kind of men, experienced fishermen, and those who made their living on the water and had been through many storms, for them to become as fearful as they did is an indication of how severe this storm was. It's kind of like around here in South Louisiana, people say, oh, I'm going to stay during the hurricane. I'm not going anywhere. And the day after, they're like, man, I'm never doing that again. Anybody besides me ever thought about that? Sometimes we wake up. I remember when I first moved down here, coming back after Hurricane Andrew, I was like, I'm glad my wife talked me into going, because I was staying. But she basically said, no, you're not. You're coming anyway. So I was glad when I got back that I didn't stay. This storm on the sea, it was a bad storm. So their skill and their experience on the water, their own skill, was not enough to see them through this difficulty. Their own efforts weren't going to be able to survive this storm. So it's imperative that we recognize that this life is going to bring a lot of storms our way, in which dependence upon our ability or our past experience or our training is probably going to fail us. They had no hope. The apparent death is pretty much upon them. They're overcome by this storm, except through all of this, Jesus, who was asleep. They're scared, they're afraid, Jesus is asleep. That's a big contrast between the disciples and Jesus in the middle of the same storm. Put that in our world terms today. The storms of life come your way. We get bent out of shape so easy. Sometimes we get bent out of shape and it's not even a storm, it's barely a shower. All right? But Jesus was asleep. I'm not saying Jesus is not interested in where they were, or he's not concerned about what they're going through or what we go through in the storms of life. I'm saying Jesus was calm enough that he could sleep in the middle of that. It would seem he was just as comfortable in the storm as he was moments before when they got in the boat to sail across the sea to the other side. The storm didn't affect his demeanor. Why is there such a difference? It's easy to, you can pass this off and say, well, he's God and he can do whatever he wants. He's not worried about storms. And it's easy to pass that off. But don't miss the point of the passage. Jesus was also a man. He could drown in a storm just like the disciples did. He breathed oxygen like everybody else. If the waves came over the boat and the boat went down, he would, I know he can walk on water. I get all that. But he was still a man in the middle of that storm. So it would seem that Jesus was asleep, he was resting, but he was not unaware of what was going on. The devil would like us to believe that God just left us all out here for nothing and the world's in motion and he don't care what's going on. He ain't looking. Sometimes we even think that. God can't be looking at this is terrible. God, where are you? He's there. He's not asleep. He's not like that. He knows what's going on. Jesus was asleep. He was resting, but he was still in charge. Jesus was more fully aware and resting in the one fact that the disciples were still unsure about. Jesus could sleep because he knew what his Father had called him to do, and he knew that his Father was going to make sure that he accomplished what he had sent him to do, no matter what the circumstances were. He was focused on God's call for him. He knew who he was. He knew what he was there to do. He knew that God was with him. He's not worried about all the circumstances this world puts forth because God is in charge of everything in this world. Look at what he asked them when he woke up. They're in total terror. They are convinced they're fixing to die. And look at what he tells them in Mark. Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? In Matthew, he says, why are you fearful, O ye of little faith? In Luke, he says, where is your faith? So he immediately calmed the storm, showing he was in control the whole time. But I think it's interesting, before he calms the storm, he asks the question, where's your faith? To me, he's saying, you're looking at this all wrong. This is nothing. And compared to Christ and compared to God Almighty, any storm you can come up with. I mean, if you think about it, Noah went through the worst storm ever. The entire world was destroyed in that storm, but God saw him through. So when storms come across our path, especially when we know that we're doing what God's called us to do, we must never yield to the sphere of the circumstances around us. The circumstances don't matter. If God said we're going to the other side, then go to the other side. If God said, go do this, don't worry about what the government thinks, your friends think, your mom thinks, your dad thinks, none of that. Just do what God told you to do. We can and should sleep good at night, resting in faith that Jesus is always with us and God is always in control. In my mind, I'm thinking about Christ sleeping in the back of the boat during the storm. What about Daniel? He's in the lion's den. Is he worried about that? He's sleeping. He's using the lions as pillows. He's sleeping like, I'm sorry, I said it wrong. It's pillars, huh, John? Yeah. She always fusses at me about that. So Daniel's sleeping in the lion's den. Paul and Silas are in prison. They're singing songs. If Jesus says we're going to the other side, then you're going to get to the other side. Don't let the storms of life get in your way. The second point we want to look at is the plea of the disciples. Again, I'm not necessarily trying to fault them here for being upset and in terror because the waves are there, because I'm pretty sure every single one of us would be doing exactly the same thing. But we do need to look at what they said. The Lord slept. He was calm and at rest in the midst of the tempest. The disciples are terrified. They woke him up. Their faith was weak, but they still had faith. Don't write them off yet. If they had been completely without faith, number one, they never would have appealed to Jesus for help. If they didn't have any faith at all, they never would have called on his name. They would not have called him Master. When they woke him up, that's what they said, Master, you're not worried about, And lastly, they would not have asked him to save them if they didn't have faith that he could. So I would say, rather than saying they're faithless, I would say their faith is weak. It could be stronger. We should strive for the stronger kind of faith. When the storms come, have faith. God's in control. They needed help. They acknowledged that. And at least they had enough sense to turn to the true source of help. Man, our nation needs help, and we're turning everywhere except the true source of help. Sometimes I watch the news and I get aggravated because they're talking about, well, we've got this and this and this. And I'm like, I know what the answer is. His name's Jesus, but nobody wants to hear what the answer is. We can have faith even in the midst of the storms of our times. They trusted in his power and were crying out for him to do something. Mark's account says this, Master, carest thou not that we perish? Matthew said, Lord, save us, we perish. Luke's account says, Master, we perish. So clearly the inevitable danger overcome their hesitation to disturb the rest of Jesus, and they cried to him in their haste and in their terror. So we can learn here not to hesitate to turn to the Master at any time, particularly in the difficult storms that we face in life. Our turning to him and asking for his help is evidence that we do have some faith, even if it is weak faith. And if you've got faith as the grain of a mustard seed, you can move mountains, so it doesn't take much. You just have to have some. So the sooner we turn to him, the quicker the rest will come. Pretty much they asked for help with this storm, and the result was immediate. Well, besides asking them where their faith was, then the storm was calmed. Don't use this old philosophy. I see bumper stickers. I still see some now. When all else fails, pray. When you take it directly to Jesus, this will confirm where your faith is and will save you from going through the potential storms. Great trouble is truly a severe test of our faith, especially when we have to wait long for deliverance. Instead of when all else fails, try prayer. Why don't we just have try prayer? Start there. Don't start with everything else. Skip all the rest of that. This miracle itself is proof that those who truly trust in Christ can find rest for their souls even when everything appears to be against them. Again, I know there's something there. There's a bunch of little ships out there too. What do you think they're thinking about all this time? This life is full of unrest. It's full of anxiety. It's full of disappointment. It's full of pressure. It's full of trials and temptations. But there's rest who all will seek it, and for everyone who's found in him. The outward life may be full of care and troubles, but within the heart of a true believer, there should be peace. The soul that's found Christ truly rests in the Lord. Jesus says this in Matthew 11:28. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy, my burden is light. If the disciples' faith in Christ had been perfect, then they wouldn't have panicked. They could have overcame that. They would have known that even if he was asleep, he still could preserve them. So our attitude and disposition under pressure prove the deficiencies and imperfections in our confidence in the Lord. When push comes to shove, what's the first thing out your mouth? What are you looking at first? It is a moment of trial that proves our readiness and our serviceableness of faith. Trials come our way not just to test us for God, from God's point of view, it's for our point of view. We need to know what we really believe. Well, if a trial comes and the first thing you do is say, Lord, you've got it, I'm not worried about that. That's a different level of faith than, Lord, I'm fixing to die, can you help me? Which is totally different than you try to fix it on your own. Where do we come when the trials go? What are we going to do about it? We need to have confidence in God. When we don't, we forfeit peace of mind, strength for life's conflicts, and hope in suffering. We forfeit all of that if we don't stay with Christ. So in times of distress, we need to do more than just make an appeal to our Master. We need to pray with an assurance that he will answer. Again, I didn't say it here, but I'm putting myself in these disciples' place. Master, you don't care that we're perished. Master, help us. I think there was some assurance in their voice here that I know you can take care of this. I can't do it. Now, maybe they missed the mark a little bit about not being prepared enough to see it for what it was when it came. I'm saying we can be more out front of these trials by having prayer and time with the Lord before the trials. We could sleep during the trial too, if we're going to be like Christ. The ultimate goal is that our lives will exemplify his life in every situation. That means that we should be found what he was doing. Well, the storm came, he was sleeping, he was resting, getting ready for what he was going to do when he got to the other side. We let the world get us all shook up. We don't get ready for what we're going to be facing when we get to the other side. Be ready for what's coming, where we're going. Are you ready to get to heaven? Are you ready to be there? A lot of it depends on what you're doing right now. If you're not doing anything to prepare to be there, then the storm of life is going to sink you. You're not going anywhere. You got to be prepared. You got to be preparing for that. That'll bring us to the third point we want to look at, is the calming miracle. Jesus, again, he wasn't awakened by the storm. This is an important point we got to realize here. In my mind, he'd have slept all the way till they got to the other side. Water, storm, waves, wind, and all that. He was going to sleep no matter what. He was just going to wake up when he got where he was going. He was awoken by the cry of his children. He's sensitive to what we feel and say and what we need. He hears us. It wasn't the noise of the storm, but the cry from his disciples. We can learn that Jesus hears his people always when they call of him out of the depths of their soul in the times of trouble. The cry, Lord, save us, never goes up in vain when it's uttered earnestly with a sincere heart. Notice there's two things that Christ did in response to the cry of the disciples. I think that he does the same thing today when we cry to Christ in the middle of a storm. First one is he rebuked the winds and the seas. Peace, be still. The wind ceased, the sea was calm. As suddenly as the storm appeared at its most raging point, at the time of most extreme danger, Jesus calmed the storm to the degree that not only the disciples recognized what had been done, but according to Matthew's account, it says, but men marveled, saying, what manner of man is this that even the winds and the sea obey him? The guys in the little ship realized what happened too. What kind of man is this that even the storms obey him? We've got to notice the significance of the Old Testament and how it speaks of the power that resides only in God. There's two verses I want to look at, two sections, Psalm 65, 6 and 7. Which by his strength setteth fast the mountains, being girded with power, which stilleth the noise of the seas, the noise of their waves, and the tumult of the people. And Psalm 107, I think David's being prophetic here to today's miracle. Here's what it says, Psalm 107, 28. Then they cry unto the Lord in their trouble, and he bringeth them out of their distress. He maketh the storm a calm, so that the waves thereof are still. Then are they glad because they be quiet, so he bringeth them unto their desired haven. That's a pretty good end. David here, I'm not so sure he's not talking about this event right here in way after when David wrote this psalm. Christ bring him through. Christ is the one who can still the storms of our restless hearts just as quickly as he stilled the storm in our text. He can still the tempest right now. The greater the storm, the greater the miracle. Do we really view things like that? When we're in the middle of a storm, do we see it for what it is? As bad as it is, Christ is going to deliver you. What a greater miracle if it's worse. He can bring us safely through the greatest storm of any adversity. He can bring a quiet and peaceful calm into what was the depths of despair and doubt. He can say, peace be still, and speak a calm into the raging circumstances around us if we'll look to him in faith. He hears his people's cry and he gives peace in return. How did he react to their plea? How will he react to your plea today? He's going to rebuke the winds and the sea, calm the storm. Second thing he did, this I think is probably the most important part. He reproved the disciples. Again, why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? Why are you fearful, O ye of little faith? Where is your faith? So obviously, the disciples had not grown in faith to the point that Jesus wanted or expected them to be. I read those questions and I'm thinking, well, that's kind of weird. He's asking them that. But to me, these questions say, I really expected y'all to be doing better than this. That's what I'm thinking. And sometimes I can think of times in my life where man, Lord, my whole world is falling apart. You need to help me here. And it all kind of goes away. And then the very next thing I hear from God is, why you just didn't trust me to start with? Why are you doing that? Just trust me to begin with. The storms are a whole lot easier if that's your attitude during the storm. I see the raging storm, but I also see my great Savior right here with me. That makes a whole big difference here. The question to consider is, have we grown in faith to the point that Jesus wants and expects us to be? How are we going to fare when he's asleep during the storm we're going through and we wake him up to see for help? Again, I'm not knocking the disciples. I probably would have fared worse than they would have. I probably have been going around looking for my life jacket and holding on for dear life. I mean, you know, but we can be in that point. If Jesus expected them to be there, if he expects us to reach that point, then that means we can. The question then becomes, why aren't we? It's not Christ's fault we're not where we're supposed to be. It's not his fault we're not as close to him as he wants us to be. Whose fault is it? It's ours. The fact that we've enjoyed the privilege and grace of his presence should make us so that we're not afraid, and we should have faith in his power and his love. This is the real rebuke of unbelief. They didn't totally believe. Christ, again, he's never negligent of his people during troubles. Never. Well, do you believe that? When you're in trouble, how are you acting? That's going to tell you whether you believe it or not. If you're calm in the storm, then you believe God's in control. He may appear to delay, but at the right moment, at the right time, he's going to do exactly what's needed. The storm, again, is not to test him for his sake, to know how you're going to react. He already knows how you're going to react. The storm is to test you, for you to know how I'm going to react, for you to be able to say, Lord, I didn't do too well in that. Can you help me believe more? Dear Lord, I missed it a little bit right there. I lost my faith in you. Can you help me be stronger in you? Because there's another storm coming. If you're still here, there's another one coming. Whatever our trouble is, he is able to overcome it. Sometimes he teaches us by deeds, sometimes by words, sometimes by silence. In the storm, and he's silent? Are we mocking God by saying, where are you? Or are we asking him what he's trying to tell us by his silence? Or are we looking at the situation trying to garner what we can learn by his silence? His silence speaks louder than any of the words of any man. His words do more than all the deeds of man put together. His deeds possess an infinite amount of eternal value for all those who will put their faith in him. The great lesson of this miracle is that Christ will be with us everywhere, with us all the time, with us in all circumstances. Do we believe that? A lot of people are okay with, yeah, Christ is with us, but then they get in a really bad circumstance and wonder where he is. I'm like, well, he's either with us or he's not. You can't. If the circumstances affect whether or not God's with you, the problem is you're not with God. We got to be with him. He's with us. He wants us to be with him in heaven. He's doing everything he can to bring us there. Look at the circumstances surrounding this for what they are. It is our responsibility to seek to be conscious of his presence, and then we will not only be safe, but we will be fully blessed. And as long as we remain willing, we will be learning life's greatest lessons. What kind of fish stories do you think this crew and these disciples told in the future? What do you think they had to say when they got to the other side and everybody was talking to them? The impact this event had upon them is reflected in the fact that not only is it included in 3 of the 4 Gospels, but all of them openly made note of the fact that Jesus rebuked them for their weakness. Again, don't lose sight of the importance of that. All 3 accounts included the fact that he rebuked them for their weakness, not just the miracle. There's something about that. Most people today conveniently leave out things like that, the rebuke, in an effort to make themselves look as good as they possibly can. Y'all know what I'm talking about. People, we give a testimony, God did this and this. We need to praise the Lord for what he did. But then you leave off the part about where God told you why he was dealing with you with what this and this happened and why it is. Because we don't want to look bad. We can't do any of that. It's all or none. You got to tell the whole story. The severity of the storm and the miraculous deliverance demand that the whole story be revealed. All of it, every single thing that happened. We can't have some of it without the rest of it. Don't lose sight of that again. The miracle occurred, again, we talked about that in all the previous 2 quarters. The miracle occurred for the person who needed it. In this case, these disciples, they need the wind to calm down because the boat's going to sink. That's for them. But it was for everybody else. It was for the people in the little ship. It was for the people that weren't right there with Christ. It was for the people that didn't have the opportunity to call upon Christ because he was in the other boat. He wasn't where they were. The miracle was for all of them, but it also was for the disciples to know, hey, you have some faith. I'm always going to be here. I'm going to take care of you. But you really got to get more faith going on than what I'm seeing right here. You got to grow some. You can't stay where you are. You've got to enlarge that. You've got to become more sure about who I am. This is just me. I'm thinking, Easter, the Friday before Easter, they put him on the cross. You need to be sure who he is when that happens. You need to know exactly what you believe, exactly where you think. So in conclusion, as we take our journey across the lake of life, we'll go through storms. We'll also go through tranquility. There'll be some smooth sailing sometimes. Like I told you at the beginning, I've been out in the boat sometimes. Man, that bay will be slick as glass all the way out past Marsh Island. You can go 20 miles offshore and not even see a wave. There'll be some times like that. There'll be some other times where the bay right there in Berwick by the bridge is whitecapping so bad you couldn't even begin to get out in the boat. We will enjoy times of favorable breeze. We'll endure times of rough and adverse winds. So the story clearly reveals the fact that even when we're following Jesus, you're going to encounter storms. I got to thinking about that too, man. That's what's wrong with this prosperity message everybody's preaching. Come get to know the Lord and everything's going to be perfect. You're going to have a big house and 2 cars and 3 boats and everything that you need, and life's all a bed of roses. Anybody besides me realize that ain't how it happens? All right? It's not. The storms are coming. It rains on the just and the unjust. All right? The storms are there. Look, we always want to say, well, I didn't have anything to do with that. Why do I have this storm? You have everything to do with that. Mankind has everything to do with that because way back in the Garden of Eden, mankind chose themselves over God, and that put things in motion. Once it's in motion, it's in motion. So right now, I think now, look, I look at our government and things our country's doing. I don't have nothing to do with that. I'm not in Washington. I'm not doing that. But nonetheless, we as a country have put things in motion, and now you're reaping the benefits for what those are, bad or good. So the storms are coming. If the disciples had paid close attention to the word of Christ before they got on the boat, they would have recognized he was in control. In Mark, this is what Christ said, "Let us pass over unto the other side." In Luke, he said, "Let us go over unto the other side of the lake." We're following Christ, God, who's in control of everything. He can do anything and everything. It's all at his discretion. If he says, let's go over to the other side, guess what's going to happen? You're going to go over to the other side. Well, this life's going to come to an end, and we're going to go over to the other side, and there's going to be a mansion for you. Well, if that's what he says, that's what we're going to do. But you got to keep focused on him. That's how you get through the storms. That's how you get where you're going. If Jesus said it, it's so. Remember his words is a great source of comfort during the time of difficulty. It would also do us well to remember that Christ is Lord of the circumstances of this life. If he is leading us in this path, then he's also leading us into that storm. Think about what we're saying here. He's in control. Danger and trouble for us is not danger and trouble for him. We need to pray that God will make us more aware of His providence and not be so quick to mark things off as coincidence. Don't be so quick to say the devil's trying me. No, he's not. Most of the time, we're trying ourselves by the stupid choices we make. Most of the time, the storm comes across our path because we ain't paying attention to doing what God told us to do. We also need to be sure that Christ is with us, because His promise of gracious guidance and merciful assistance is only enjoyed by those who are loyal to Him and His cause. All these people say, well, God would never send a person to hell. He loves the whole world. That's partially true. He loves the whole world. It's partially true. He's not going to send you to hell. But if you don't accept Him, you're going to hell. They leave that part out. The questions then become, is Christ with us or not? Better yet, are we with Christ or not? Do we preach, teach, and live by His truth? Are His principles of life practiced in our lives and in our homes? Those are some questions we got to seriously look at. Just me again. My suggestion would be, if you're not in a storm right now, look at those 3 questions before the storm gets here, because it's going to be a whole lot easier to go through it if you can answer those correctly. The answer to all the questions are not found in the shape of the vessel, but rather in the character of the crew. Let us learn to see some things here. The Bible says in Hebrews 13:5, let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content with such things as ye have. For He hath said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee, so that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me. That's a powerful verse. If you're going through a storm, that's some words you can rest on. This truth will make us appreciate Christ's friendship, Christ's fellowship, Christ's faithfulness. Failure to hunger and thirst after God and His righteousness signifies that we're satisfied with our spiritual condition. Don't let the devil make you become complacent. I'm good enough where I'm at. No, you're not. And I don't know why you would want to settle when you realize it's from glory to glory to glory. This is just me again. 25 million, 100 bazillion years into eternity, there's some more glory. Don't stay where you're at. Move on. When you get to heaven the first day, don't stay. Oh, I'm here. All right, I'll just stay here. Come on, let's see what's at and let's see what's next. Talk to the Lord. He's going to show you something even better. The trials and tests here in this lifetime prove whether God is satisfied with our spiritual condition or not. If we will allow the spiritual growth to take place, it becomes possible for us to know in advance all of this. Salvation is a sure thing. You know whether you're going to heaven or not. This is just me again. In my mind, when people ask if you're going to heaven, you say, I think so, I think not. You know so. You either know or you don't. And when the storms come, if you know, then you don't need to panic. You don't need to worry. You just need to stay with Christ and follow the directions He's given you, and you are going to the other side. Thank you all very much. I look forward to seeing you all next week. Oh, I do have next week's lesson. Well, next week is Easter lesson. Then we're going to look at the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000, if you all want to review that too. Thank you all very much.